Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Carrie Thomas, Associate Director of the Chicago Jobs Council, and I'm joined here by Chris Warden and Mary Kay Devine from Women Employed. It's our pleasure to welcome you to today's meeting of the Pathways to Careers Network. But before we dive into today's meeting, I'm going to ask Mary Kay to review some webinar housekeeping items with you.
Hello, good afternoon. During the presentation, please note that your phone lines will be muted. We have a very full agenda for today, so we ask that you must hold your questions until after the presentations. The chat window in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen will be open throughout the meeting, so you can type in questions in the chat window at any time during the presentations. You can continue to use the chat feature after the presentations, but you can also use the button at the top left to raise your hand so that you may ask questions over the phone. You will have the opportunity today to share your thoughts through polling questions. At the end of the session,
the conference has been muted.
At the end of the session, a survey will pop up on your screen, and we ask that you take 2 minutes to provide your feedback so that we can incorporate it in our planning for future webinars. As you heard when you entered, and just now, the webinar is muted and being recorded. We will circulate a link to the recording so that you can access it after today's meeting. And finally, I'll post this number in the chat window, but if anyone on the line experiences any technical difficulties, we encourage you to contact our webinar service provider, ReadyTalk, at 1-800-843-9166. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Kay. We want to ground today's conversation, as we always do, in why the Pathways to Careers Network came together in the first place. And that is Illinois' urgent need to improve adult transition into college and into careers. Fundamentally, this is about employment and employment opportunities. And we know that by the year 2020, about 67% of Illinois jobs will require a college degree or certificate, and yet 3 million Illinois adults do not have any education beyond high school. As a result of this skills gap, about 100 future jobs, 24 out of 100 future jobs, 24 could go unfilled. To address this skills gap, Women Employed and the Chicago Jobs Council launched the Pathways to Careers Network, an initiative to increase college and career success for adult learners with low basic skills. The Pathways to Careers Network advances the missions of both of our organizations. For 40 years, Women Employed has been mobilizing people and organizations to expand educational and employment opportunities for America's working women. For over 30 years, the Chicago Jobs Council has worked with its members to ensure access to employment and career advancement opportunities for people living in poverty.
I just want to make a quick comment. This is Mary Kay, because we're getting a lot of chatter in the window. The beeping sound is the noise of additional guests joining today's webinar. So if you experience any other technical issues, please send me a chat note, but it is people joining the webinar, so thank you for your patience.
Thanks, Mary Kay. So we wanted to do the membership poll, which I think is the previous slide. So as we always do, we like to get feedback from webinar participants, and there'll be a couple of polls during today's webinar. So the first is just to get a sense of how many of you are already on our membership list. So please confirm your membership in the Pathways to Careers Network.
Okay, thank you.
I'll now turn it over to Chris Warden, who will introduce today's presenters.
Today's webinar is the 5th Pathways to Careers webinar based on the recently released This is also the 3rd follow-up to our February 5th webinar featuring Chapter 5 of the Guide on Contextualized Curriculum. Today we're joined by the team from City Colleges of Chicago to present the Healthcare Bridge Lesson Plans for Reading and Writing, the first in a series of contextualized curricula created through a partnership between City Colleges and Women Employed. Today, we'll hear from Samir Gadkari, the Associate Vice Chancellor of Adult Education at City Colleges, Ann Darton, the Project Team Leader, Stephanie Summers, Workforce Management Consultant, and they're joined by Marcia Medema, Program Director with City Colleges, who will help answer your questions as we talk about their work to create new bridge programs, write contextualized curricula, and foster best practices in teaching. Now I'm going to hand the webinar over to Samir Gadkari, the Associate Vice Chancellor for Adult Ed, who will get us started. And
hello,
Samir,
can you hear us?
We can hear you. Please
Perfect.
Go ahead.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining. I'm Samir Gadkari. I'm responsible for the adult education programs at City Colleges. I'm going to start off with just a couple quick minutes of background on what we're doing here and why we're doing it. Then I'll turn it over to Ann and Stephanie to walk you through the Bridge program and the specific lesson plans we've developed. This whole effort is part of, it's an outgrowth of the reinvention process at City Colleges that some of you may be familiar with. About 3 years ago, we had a new chancellor, Cheryl Hyman, who came to City Colleges and focused the institution on goals, on metrics and on goals and on trying to improve student outcomes. And you can see 4 of the big goals that we have here. The fourth one is while we work on multiple goals at the same time through bridge programming, one of the big focuses for us has been getting adult education students to go to college. There's a couple of reasons we've thought about that. The first one is there's been historically very few students going from adult education to college. We have about 30,000 students, but historically only about 200 of them would go to college. And that's in a context from a labor market perspective where we know that in order to get a family-sustaining wage and a good job, we need to be able to get students some college education. They don't need to be able to get an associate's degree necessarily, but we know that they need that first entry-level credential to get to a family-sustaining wage. Partly as a result of that, and partly as a result of research that shows that their employment rates will be better, that if we don't do this and we just get them a GED, the students will have labor market earnings on par with high school dropouts, possibly at best as good as high school graduates. We looked at what other organizations across the country were doing to get students from adult education programs into workforce programs. Some of the models we found were right here in Chicago. We looked at Instituto and Erie and several other organizations that have been running these types of programs for some years, and ultimately found that these types of programs were the best ones to get students from adult ed into the occupational credentials that would get them on a pathway to family-sustaining wages. One of the big other efforts I should mention to City Colleges that this is linked to is the College to Careers effort. The College to Careers effort is a mayoral level initiative launched by Mayor Emanuel and Chancellor Hyman, and it's refocusing City Colleges' occupational offerings towards labor market relevance. And the way it's doing that is taking the 6 highest growth industry sectors in 2018, matching up one of our colleges against that, and allowing our team to work with some of the biggest employers in each of those areas, define a system of stackable credentials, looking not only at what the credentials are that we offer, but also at the curriculum, and making sure that that curriculum will help our students get jobs and help them when they're in the workforce. Those employers, over 100 so far, have agreed not only to help us with the curriculum, but also oftentimes to interview or to give our students jobs. And so we're really excited about that initiative and the way that this bridge programming helps us move forward and move students into those career opportunities. And with that, let me turn it over to Ann.
Thank you, Samir. We're just passing a keyboard around here. And I'm going to advance through some slides very quickly. Let's see. Let me try it this way. There, okay. Hi, everyone. It's our pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to very quickly give you an overview of what bridge programs look like in City Colleges of Chicago. I know many of us have bridge programs or are thinking about implementing them, and the format for those programs may differ slightly. The lesson plans that you're going to hear about today could be used with any type of bridge program, but it will help you to hear how our bridges are structured. First of all, our programs are intensive. Our students are coming 20 hours or more per week. They're taking a set of linked courses: contextualized language arts, contextualized math, healthcare knowledge and skills in the case of our healthcare bridges. They're in the bridges for 16 weeks, and we do believe that with the new GED test, we well may have to extend our bridges by another 8 weeks. Some of our bridges incorporate a vocational component, which we consider to be part of the bridge as well. So overall, our bridges are preparing students for a GED test, for transition to occupational programs, and in some cases for entry-level employment. We have bridge curriculum that's leveled. We have high intermediate, low ASE or adult secondary education, and high ASE in our bridges. So there are multiple entry points to our bridges. And as we move forward, I just want to differentiate between curriculum in this last bullet point and lesson plans that Stephanie will be talking about. As you are well aware, a curriculum will include student learning outcomes, may even include a week-by-week syllabus, and may include activities. But the lesson plans are something else again, because they get down to a very detailed level, what will happen day to day in the classroom, and Stephanie will be talking to you more about that shortly. Our bridges are designed to serve students, take students into the bridge when they're at the high intermediate level. So their TABE reading and math scores will be 6th to just below the 9th grade level. We're looking at the students who would normally be considered adult basic education students in our own programs. We're also looking at English language learners who could score into that range. And we would also be able to serve high school graduates or GED completers who unfortunately find that they're not ready to enter campus when they take the enter college when they take the campus entrance exam. In any case, we want to make sure that the student has confirmed an interest in the target industry for that bridge through some kind of career exploration, career awareness, so that they're making a good decision that will work for them. We want to make sure they're able to arrange their own schedule to be able to come 20 hours a week, and that they have demonstrated the will, the grit, the determination to stick to something, even if their basic skills are low, that they will make the commitment to this program. Very briefly, I'm showing you a schematic of what those linked courses that I refer to will look like. Students, this shows you the 3 different levels of bridges that we have, ranging from high intermediate to high ASE here. We are using the first 2 levels that you see there as what we call our general healthcare bridge right now, but are planning to add the 3rd level in the future. Students are taking contextualized language arts, contextualized math, and a few other things that will help them, along with health-related knowledge and skills. And just very briefly, I'm going to show you in the next slide, there it is, that in some of the bridges, in the second 8 weeks, students are getting a vocational component, but in most cases, the students will need to come back into the bridge for more contextualized language arts and math, or if not, into an accelerated GED class to get completely ready for GED and transition. As we introduce the next component where Stephanie will be talking about lesson plans, I just want to mention that as we all got together with Women Employed to talk about the need for something extra for our bridges, we thought about some challenges. We thought about the fact that there are wonderful adult educators out there, but they have not yet been exposed to contextualizing instruction, so they need some kind of guide in being able to deliver bridge instruction. We know that professional development is useful and important, but what happens after the professional development session is over and teachers are then alone in their classrooms? They need some kind of support from us. And program managers also need to be confident of the quality of bridge instruction going on in the classroom, that it is actually achieving its goal. So the idea of detailed daily lesson plans seemed like a perfect way to meet these challenges, not only in providing teachers a roadmap, but also fostering student-centered and project-based learning, which is what we are interested in our bridges. Professional development can then refer back to the lesson plans that we've provided, and having the lesson plans as a framework really does get teachers working and talking together when we do get together. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to, is the audio not working? I guess it's okay. I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie.
Well, Anne, actually, before we turn it over to the next speaker, we'd actually like to take a minute for our participants to take a poll. We're interested to know how enrollment is structured in your bridge program. We know there are a number of programs around the state that have rolling enrollment, although some others do cohorts, and there are some hybrids in between. So if you'll take a moment to respond to the poll results. And then once we have the poll results, I'd actually like to take a couple of minutes if anyone has questions for Samir or Anne, and then we will welcome Stephanie to talk about the lessons themselves. So we have about 25 responses right now. We're going to give it a couple more minutes, give a few more people a chance to respond. Okay, well, it looks like we have all of our responses at this point. And as I said, what I would like to do now is to take questions, if there are questions for Samir or Anne. And we do have one question. It came in through our chat window, and please feel free to use the chat window to ask questions. This question is for Samir, and it's from Jody Davidson. And Samir, Jody asks, why does the master's degree and doctoral degree columns drop down so much? And I believe Jody's referring to slide number 9, where you were looking at the median earnings.
Yeah, so if you look at that slide carefully, and let's see if we can pull it up, and could you maybe move to that slide? You'll notice that there's a column for bachelor's degree, and then there's a column for bachelor's degree or higher. And that's why, that last column is kind of an amalgam of the professional degrees and the advanced degrees, and that's why it appears to drop. And do you have something you want to add?
I'll just add that in other presentations I've attended, the point has been made that sometimes with more advanced degrees, since hourly wages are not necessarily calculated, those are calculated on the basis of annual wages, that some of those earnings may not be showing up in this particular table.
Yeah.
Well, we have a second question from Betsy Rubin, and she'd like to know what the enrollment numbers are now at CCC. And I'm assuming that Betsy is asking about the bridge enrollment numbers.
Yes. For the fiscal year that just now closed, I can tell you that our total bridge enrollment was 449 students. And since we're talking about healthcare today, I can mention that for the fiscal year, 330 of those enrollments were in our healthcare bridges. So you can see that healthcare bridge students make up most of our bridge enrollment.
Yeah. The other two programs that we have are manufacturing and transportation, distribution, and logistics. We're also interested in adding a culinary hospitality bridge in the coming months.
Okay, we have another question that has come in, and the question is, where can we find more detailed information about both the bridge and the gateway programs at City Colleges?
Well, there's two ways we can do that. We have some information up on the website, but you should feel free to get in touch with Ann or I, and we'd be happy to send you any information you'd like.
Okay, and we will put their numbers and their emails, their contact information up on the screen at the end of the webinar. We're going to take one more question, or actually I'm going to comment on one last question that we received from Luz Robles. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The question is, what type of professional development have you developed to help teachers contextualize the curriculum? And can you recommend some good resources? And I'm glad you asked that question, because during the course of the presentation, and our next presenter, Stephanie Summers, she's going to talk about the lesson plans, but then she's also going to talk about the professional development that is built into and around the lesson plans. So next, I would like to introduce Stephanie. In her career, she has pretty much played almost any role that you could play in creating successful bridge programs, from being an instructor in the classroom, a program administrator, curriculum writer, professional developer. But her main role in this project was to create the crosswalk for the lessons, and then to do the actual writing of the lesson plans, and then gather feedback from teachers as the lessons were tested in the classroom. I want to note that these lessons will be posted after today's webinar in anticipation. But in anticipation of that, I would like now to turn the mic over to Stephanie so that she can talk about the lesson plans.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris. There we are. We have the right slide up for us to begin. There are three sections that I'm going to go over, with opportunities to ask questions in between. The whole three is focused on listeners really understanding what they have an opportunity to download on the Women Employed website. And this first one is really the more technical section to talk about the foundation of the healthcare bridge reading and writing lesson plans. So to start with, we'll talk about the overall bridge goals. And that is to prepare students for the 2014 GED, which is a more stringent GED version of the GED test than is currently being given. To prepare people for entry-level jobs in their chosen field, in this case, healthcare. And for the bridge to be the first step on a career path, towards career path opportunities, so that students are prepared to enter into the community college programs that provide stackable credentials and certificate programs that are linked to the associate's and a bachelor's degree opportunities. So what we did in the first step of developing these lesson plans was to decide what were the standards we wanted to link the lesson plans to. So we did select standards and compare them to come out with a document that we can that we can have the lesson plans focus on. So the question that these answer is, what standards are needed for students to reach their academic goals? And so we started with the Common Core state standards. And these standards are national level standards that are recommended for states to adopt. And we chose the standards for reading, writing, language, and speaking and listening. We also looked at the 2014 GED standards, which very happily are correlated to these national level Common Core state standards. Then we looked at the Illinois Language Arts Content Standards. which because Illinois did adopt the Common Core standards at the national level and made their customized them. They made some additions. We looked at how those three sets of standards related. The Illinois Language Arts Content Standards are in turn divided into NRS, or National Reporting System, levels that correspond to the three levels for the bridge. So the 6.0 to 8.9 TABE scores in reading, Bridge 2, 9.0 to 10.9, and Bridge 3, 11.0 to 12.9, so getting ready for college. We also looked at Compass test requirements to answer the question, are these requirements covered by the standards in the content standards and the GED? So, what we came up with was what we're calling our condensed standards. This final set is inclusive of the standards that are focused on academic goals without being redundant. The condensed standards eliminate duplication, and there is lots of duplication, and what we wanted was to have a document that teachers could really see the relationship between what they were doing in the classroom and a set of condensed standards. We also wanted to preserve the details of the GED standards to make them plain. And we did confirm that the Compass measures were covered by the combination of these two documents. So the table at the bottom of this slide kind of summarizes how two sets of condensed standards are being applied. For the Career Bridge 1, it's primarily the Illinois Common Core standards for the NRS Level 4. These standards are correlated to the GED, but don't as yet incorporate specific GED requirements. These are important to be able to assure students in this level that there really is a continuum of these standards and that what they are doing in the class is in fact directly related to the GED. The other set of standards are used for the Bridge 2 and Bridge 3 levels. These is a combination of the Illinois Common Core for NRS Level 5 and 6 and those specifics to the GED. So it's one set of standards for both levels with with the GED portion including science and social studies that are addressed as part of the contextualization process in these curricula. So the condensed standards that resulted from this process of comparing is really the foundation for the stated academic goals for a bridge. So the academic goals are to attain the GED, to be college ready, and to pass the Compass test so that students can go on with their career path plans. These standards are in turn aligned with all the lesson plans, and you will see that the lesson plans include specific standards that are covered on a daily basis. And these can always also be used by students, and teachers can use these standards to understand the relationship between what they are learning in the classroom and their academic goals. And so often students are trying to ask what is the relevance of what it is we're doing, and this allows teachers and students to be able to talk about that relevance and also to talk about naming skills in relation to what they're doing in the classroom. This slide looks at how does the Healthcare Bridge series prepare students for career outcomes. And the important word here is it being contextualized, reading and writing course being contextualized in these different ways. So the Bridge 1 course that's being released. It's focused on career planning activities that include investigation of the specifics of career employment options, the specifics of training options, matching of skills and interests to career plans, and development of a detailed, realistic career plan. So the idea is at this level, when students are still in the high intermediate ABE, that they're really looking into their futures so they can chart a plan and go through the process to reach the community college level. At the other two levels that have been developed, contextualization involves critical issues from the industry, and that also introduces students to required GED science and social studies topics. So at the low ASE levels, there's a 4-week unit on nutrition, the science of nutrition, and the politics of nutrition, a 4-week unit on healthcare reform. And at the high ASE level, students have a look at drug resistance and its impact on healthcare, hospitals and other healthcare facilities. And then the economics of medicine, including drug shortages that are also experienced currently in the field. Okay.
Well, Stephanie, I'm actually going to ask that you continue to go on with your presentation and tell us a little bit about the format, sequencing, and themes in the lessons, and then we'll stop to take questions.
Okay, thanks. Then let's do it. This section is about the specifics of the lesson plans for this Bridge 1 reading and writing class. So here is the kind of picture of the full inputs into the development of the lesson plans. On the right-hand side, you'll see that listing of the four sets of standards or tests that we looked at and came up with our condensed standards. You'll see at the top 2 curriculum that were consulted and portions integrated, the ICCB statewide healthcare bridge curriculum and the Central State SARE healthcare bridge curriculum, which is in operation at Daly College. And to the left, this bubble talks about prior sector knowledge, best practice models including Carreras en Salud, and the Daly College Medical Bridge, practitioner interviews, and career cluster information were all used to inform the lesson plans. And so the goals of these lesson plans, meaning the Bridge 1 lesson plans, is really to provide all the Bridge teachers with a complete resource they can use to establish highly interactive, student-centered practices in their classrooms. So once you download these lesson plans and have them an electronic copy, all the materials are either attachments or online links. So once you get it, you have the whole thing. The second goal is to include only high-interest contextualized materials that will engage students in the process of establishing and meeting their career path goals. And lastly, to focus on the development of critical thinking skills as they relate to the standards we've been talking about. And we will talk about critical thinking a little bit later. All right. So what's in a daily lesson plan? Very detailed. So each lesson plan per day includes a set of objectives that's correlated to the day's activities. The standards from the condensed standards that are applied to that day. All of the materials that will be needed for that day that are included as attachments or website links. And the activities, usually 3 or 4, that give step-by-step instructions on how to walk students through a specific exercise. And these are really thought of as being full imaginings of each activity and how the activities are linked together. There's also approximate minutes that each exercise is estimated to take. And homework. And I just wanted to say a word about homework. As you've noticed, I think that this course has aggressive goals. It's 6.0 to 8.9 in reading and writing in 8 weeks. And so the need for homework on a daily basis is important, and this has kind of suggested that in recruiting students for this course, that they understand the intensive nature of the course, which means homework. This is the structure of the lesson plans. It's a 64-hour course. Each lesson plan is 2 hours. There are 4 2-hour classes per week, and the course is for 8 weeks. And it has a simple structure in the sense that there are 4 reading weeks, and each is followed by a writing week. So it's a reading week, writing week, writing over 8 weeks. And because of this level, all reading weeks include pre-writing assignments that prepare students for a formal writing assignment that will be evaluated, edited, and revised during the 8 weeks. It's assumed in this course that this is the first time students will attempt an essay, and this pre-writing piece is important for being able to say that they're constructing something larger out of things they've already done. And the 4 reading-writing units are linked together to culminate in a final project. This is not a separate skill-focused training, but it's skills taught in the context of specific linked projects. And I'll go over this briefly. This is the overview of the 8-week course, so you can get a sense of how it's organized and what it focuses on. Week 1 really focuses on a family health issue for students and students' families, and they do research and reading around that, research, reading, and writing, so that they can put together a linked 4-paragraph theme for the writing week. Week 3 focuses on those specific healthcare careers that are available at the City College, and uses YouTube video reading and internet. And there's an ongoing emphasis, as there is in the standards, to really use multimedia sources for finding out information. So political cartoons, YouTube, internet, and more traditional readings. And that leads in week 4 to a 4-paragraph theme that starts to get at the particular kind of job they might be interested in. And then the last 4 weeks, week 5, is understanding the relationship between training and jobs, the specifics of how to get there within the city colleges, and the strategies they will use that they will share with each other as a class, but they will use to keep themselves motivated by making all of this happen. And the writing is really a 5-paragraph theme that details that plan. Week 7 is getting this ready for a PowerPoint presentation, and all of the questions in week 8 have to do with each slide has a question that they need to respond to give their very specific, realistic plan as a presentation to the classroom, but also to think of employers that they might be talking to as another audience that's applicable here. So, looks like we're here.
Well, next we're going to issue another poll for our participants because we're curious to know about what your curriculum needs are, whether you're looking for materials to integrate into an existing curriculum, whether you have a curriculum but it needs to be contextualized. Even if you have a curriculum and you have pieces of that you would like to share with others, please let us know. And we see quite a few responses coming in. There's also an option at the bottom for those who do not have a curriculum. So you're in the market for one right now. We'll take just another minute or two, and in the meantime, please feel free to type your questions into the chat window or to raise your hand if you have questions for Stephanie about what she's covered so far in terms of the crosswalk and the structure of the lesson plan. It looks like we have most of our responses to the poll, so I am going to jump in. Stephanie, actually we had a couple of questions from both Betsy Rubin and Becky Raymond, but the question is whether you can clarify in the crosswalk if you're talking about the K through 12 Common Core standards or if you're talking about the ICCB content standards.
The Illinois content standards adopted the Common Core standards for adult education with their changes, and so and divided into the NRS levels, and so that translation into adult education focused standards is what those NRS levels do. Does that make sense?
We will watch for follow-up questions to come in. We've got another question from Jose Mosquera. I hope I'm also pronouncing that correctly. But he asks, how do you grade homework?
I think that if once people have an opportunity to look at the curriculum, they will see that there is a lot of students learning to give input into each other's writing, and that teachers have a clear set of questions to answer along with students about how to improve essays. And that this is really students learning about what makes good essays and learning from each other. So it's not so much about grades. It's really so much more about a process about how students can improve.
Well, we have a follow-up question, and this may be one that Samir or Ann or even Marcia may be able to help us respond to. But the follow-up question is, what is your passing or graduation criteria?
I assume this means at completion of the bridge, so I'm going to answer that question. We actually try to make very clear to our students at the beginning that we have criteria for finishing the bridge. We do have certificates. Of course, they're just City College certificates. These are not industry recognized certifications, but we have a certificate of excellence which requires 95% attendance in all their classes and good participation and completion of homework assignments, and we have a certificate of completion which is 85% attendance in all classes, and of course good participation and completion of most of the assignments. And we're finding that the students, when they understand this, will step up and meet the standards, although many of you know from working with an adult education population, it's quite challenging for them. They have many things going on in their lives. They have young children at home. They may be in a low-income situation. So we're really asking quite a lot of them, but they are in a very large percentage of the cases meeting the expectations, and that makes us very happy because we know that these are the kinds of good study habits and attendance habits and classroom habits that they'll need to succeed once they transition.
Well, we're now going to, we have a question on the phone from Maureen Helwig. Maureen, if you can hit *7 to unmute your line. Please.
I did. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Ask your question.
I did actually type it, but I will say it out loud. And I think Ann probably would know this because I've asked this before. One of the requirements in the terms of the COMPASS test even for healthcare students, is a fairly high-level math performance, math knowledge. And this takes up a lot of time in the curriculum at the bridge level in order to prepare them for that. And I'm wondering if there have been any considerations about modifying that, and also where in the bridge curriculum, I realize today was just an overview of some lesson plans, but and mostly focused on reading and writing. But when does the math come in?
The math is incorporated, as you saw in the schematics, so students are getting contextualized math as well at all the levels of the bridge.
I mean, what we looked at today, what Stephanie reviewed, was 8 weeks reading, writing, correct?
Right, and just to make sure everyone knows, the other 2 levels of healthcare bridge language arts lesson plans or reading and writing lesson plans will be released and available to you very soon. Today you're just getting the lowest of the 3 levels, but all 3 are about to be released.
So does the math come in Bridge 2 then?
So math comes at all levels of the bridge, and we do have materials for teaching math contextually, but we unfortunately don't have the level of detail with math that we do with reading and writing. Someday we will hopefully have this level of detail to daily lesson plan level detail, but we do have a curriculum for our teachers, and it is contextualized.
And then has there been any further consideration about reducing the demand for math skills in the healthcare compass test?
I know from previous conversations that, Maureen, that what you're talking about is transitioning students to the credit LPN program, correct?
No, not LPN, just even go for, say, medical assistant.
Okay, so anything that's on the credit side may have a math requirement. Some of the programs that students are transitioning into may not. And these are all things, Samir may want to answer this as well, but these are all some things that are being looked at right now. But
yeah, I mean, as we look at the curriculum overall for healthcare, it's certainly something we're thinking about. But you know, I don't know that there's any imminent decrease in compass scores we're requiring for any particular college level classes in healthcare.
So in other words, the bridge that's being outlined here is not to help students get into credit classes. It's just for non-credit.
No, it absolutely gets students into credit classes. That's why we're offering the contextual language arts along with the contextual math.
Okay, but so what you're saying is by the end of Bridge 3, I'm looking at the chart on the screen here now, by the end of Bridge 3, they should have enough math to pass the compass test to get into credit classes.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay, so ASE Math 3, well, they all say Math 3. Okay.
Well, yes, we did jump back to the slides so folks could take a look at what the structure was. And today we are talking about the language arts or the reading and writing lessons. But there are several other pieces of the bridge that are not specifically being talked about today. I'd actually like to jump to take another question.
Okay.
And thank you, Maureen, for your questions and the follow-up. We appreciate that. We have a question from Luz Robles, who's wondering which specific healthcare entry-level positions do most of the students tend to choose?
Yeah, so there's 2 parts to that, and I'll answer one part of it, and I'll answer the other. There's a long-term vision for this, and there's the immediate-term vision for this. In the long term, we're hoping to have a common set of entryways into healthcare, going to be a healthcare core, and instead of having 22 discrete entry points into healthcare, we're going to have just the one, possibly 2, that take the common pieces from all of those different healthcare pathways and pull them into one basic certificate worth of information, just 3 or 4 credit classes. We're still working out the exact details of that. But that's the long-term vision. In the near term, Ann can talk a little bit more about where we've built some of these bridges and where some of the students are going.
Sure. We actually have 3 different types of healthcare bridge, believe it or not. We have one that is more general, so we're hoping that students, after doing career exploration, might go into any number of entry-level pathway or positions and pathways. We have another bridge that specifically offers training for, we call it here in Chicago, BNA training, Basic Nursing Assistant Training. but it is actually training to sit for the Certified Nursing Assistant exam. So the students in that particular bridge, most of them will actually sit for that exam and at least start out as Certified Nursing Assistants. We hope that they'll continue on the pathway and increase their education and their skills and their access to jobs. The third bridge is our newest bridge, and we're actually preparing students for entry-level medical office positions. So this is on the support side, but actually introducing them to the very, very beginning levels of what medical billing and coding is all about, and ultimately what health information management is all about, so that the students will be inspired to enter college credit and follow a health information management pathway. And Samir is quite right. We're looking forward to the day when, on the credit side, things change a little bit so that it's a little bit clearer to the students how to transition to credit, and the fact that there's something on the credit side that can lead in many different directions.
Thank you, Anne. We're actually going to close out the questions just at this point. We will have another opportunity for questions later. But there were a couple that I wanted to respond to real quickly before I hand this back to Stephanie, who's going to talk about some of the teaching principles that are behind the lessons. We had a question from Catherine Powell, which says, can we get a peek at sample lesson plans? There was a sample attached to the confirmation when you signed up for the webinar, but even better than that, after the webinar later this afternoon, we will have the full set of lesson plans posted on the Pathways to Careers Network website. And as we close out the session today, we'll give you the address for that website so that you can access the full plans. There was also a question from Betsy Rubin. She wanted to know if it was possible to adapt the lessons to a less intensive program that would take place over twice as much time. And just for Betsy and for everyone participating on the webinar to know, is the plan through the Pathways to Careers Network is to do as much as we can to have conversations with those who are interested and connect them to the writer, connect them to Stephanie, if that be the case, to help you do some of that adaptation. So the answer is yes, it can definitely be adapted, but that doesn't mean it can be done without some work, but we're willing to be a partner in some of that work. So with that, I am going to hand the microphone back to Stephanie Summers, and we are going to hear a little bit about the teaching principles that are behind the lesson plan.
Okay, thanks again, Chris. Let's move on, because there are 3 slides of these principles, and talk about how they relate. These teaching principles really are what animate the lesson plans, and it's really to make sure that classrooms, that teachers adopt active learning and student-centered practices in the classroom. So the first one is that all work must be, the first principle is all work must be grounded in students' experience, decisions, and goals. And I'm assuming all adult education teachers know that in order to engage students, they really need to understand how what they're learning is, it can relate to them and their lives. The second one is teachers must ask, not tell. That teachers should avoid having the answers. They should instead set up situations where students can pose questions, come up with their own answers, and propose the ways to finding out additional information. This can be difficult for some teachers who are used to having the answers and having students learn from what it is that they know. These activities really pose students as the actors in their own learnings, and having teachers ask questions that don't have right or wrong answers, so that students can start to both use their critical skills thinking, but also come up with their own ways of dealing with new material. The third one is very important one, and I'm sorry to say has a mistake in it. This has to do with critical thinking skills, and one of the critical thinking skills is missing. The lineup is critical thinking skills are to comprehend, analyze, apply, synthesize, evaluate. And what's really important about this is that this it describes a process where students must comprehend the text and analyze the text to understand what is going on, how the author is making their point. But it's really the higher level skills are taking that, applying their new knowledge to new situations, looking at meaning from different texts and synthesizing it, and then evaluating, being able to look at all of the new meaning and come up with their own opinion. So this progression of critical thinking skills really moves students to the text and away from the text so that they can learn to have their own independent thinking. This is important because independent thinking is a good thing, but it's also one of the primary values that's in both the standards and necessary for the GED. So the series of activities really move students through not just reading and answering questions, but moving through the process to get to larger meanings and to be able to come to their own opinions. This next set of principles, activities must incorporate visual, auditory, and kinesthetic techniques in each activity or set of activities. Make sure all students can be tuned in. Again, adult education teachers know that it's important to have active classrooms to keep students engaged, and students really do tune into material using different channels, so it's important to hit all of them. Activities must encourage students with varying skill levels to bring their thoughts and experience to the table as equals with other students in the classroom. This is an important kind of democratic principle to make sure that everyone has a voice in what is being learned, and so that there not being very many right or wrong answers, and that students are coming equally to the table with their own thoughts, and that the interest is what's the thought process, and what is it that each is contributing. The third one is students need to work in pairs and groups to hear, see, and work with material before they present considered answers to the class. These opportunities that are repeated, again, make sure that people are seeing, hearing, and doing something with material, but they're also doing it as a way to be equally prepared for participating in classroom discussions. And lastly, two last ones. As being a writing teacher, this is very important to me, that writing first drafts needs to be free of worry for students. All of the concerns about penmanship, spelling, and grammar needs to be part of the rewriting process, not the initial drafting process. I know that some teachers sometimes have difficulty with this too. They want students to know how to write first before they write. These lesson plans are really designed to have students write a lot, inviting them to make all kinds of mistakes, but also inviting them to say the things that are important to them. And that students will learn new rules and ways of developing their writing along the way and apply them as part of a process. And lastly, and this is very related, grammar is best learned in the context of a writing project, in which students are interested in their communication of something important to them. So that by privileging what a student is trying to say, what is the meaning of what they're trying to say, they can utilize kind of technical tools to improve what they're saying for a larger audience. And then very lastly, the last slide, that there are many ways, multiple benefits, but many ways that these lesson plans can be used. Already stated that teachers can have a complete set of lesson plans that they can work with all of the materials included. multiple teachers who are using the set of lesson plans can learn from each other about how to best to implement them. And so those are opportunities for more than one teacher to really talk about what's effective and how to better target students to target and serve the students that that are being served. If there's a substitute needed, lesson plans certainly can say what needs to happen that day so that the class can stay on track. These lesson plans and the principles behind them can also be the basis for professional development. The activities will walk teachers through perhaps new kinds of activity types and to learn how to deliver those effectively and to practice those principles in their classrooms. And lastly, certainly if there's classroom observation, they can be focused on effective implementation of the activities that are before both the teacher and the observer. And so it's a good way for supporting teachers as they learn to adapt them.
So. Thank you, Stephanie. We're actually, we want to give folks a minute to type in questions, and we've had questions come in as you've talked about the principles behind the lesson plans. So please feel free to use the chat window or, again, to raise your hand if you have a question. And meanwhile, we have a question for you. We're interested to know what instructional supports teachers most request or they most need related to contextualized curriculum. Do they need experience in teaching a contextualized curriculum because they have not had a lot of experience with that? Do they simply need contextualized materials in the classroom? Do they need time to observe master teachers or to see demonstration lessons? Or do they need meetings to discuss instruction? And this is actually a multiple answer poll, so you're not limited to just one choice in this poll. And we see a number of questions coming in, but we want to take a couple more minutes for folks to respond to the poll. I know, in fact, we have a number of teachers on the line, so this is your opportunity to voice what it is you most need in terms of support. Okay, I think we've still got a couple of responses coming in. I'm going to leave the poll up and let a couple more people answer, and as we do that, I'm going to start with the first question, or the question that kicked off Stephanie's presentation, which came from Luz Robles, which is, what type of professional development have you developed to help teachers contextualize the curriculum, and can you recommend some good resources? And I'm guessing that probably Anne and Marcia can also be helpful in answering this question.
Well, actually, we're depending on Stephanie a great deal for this, so I think we should let her speak to this because she's been working directly with the teachers.
But I think that's a great idea, and this is Anne again. Maybe I'll just mention very quickly that before we had our big bridge launch, we actually offered teachers the chance to come together for a workshop on how to contextualize instruction. It was very experiential. And some of the participants in that workshop then applied to become bridge instructors and did in fact become bridge instructors. And beyond that, we have been offering professional development to our bridge teachers once in the spring and once in the fall, and it would be great to have Stephanie talk about what we're planning next.
So, yes, these conversations with teachers who have been given this new curriculum and have been working to implement it. We've had some conversations, but are in the process of formalizing those conversations over a period of time so that people can try the lesson plans, have a fuller understanding of how they're constructed and how to use them, talk about lessons learned, and get a little more deep into some of the principles and their applications. But it's certainly professional development that is around how teachers, what teachers say they think is effective, what they have used that's been effective, and strengthening their skills in areas that they're concerned about.
Thank you. Well, we have quite a few new questions, and we're coming up near 10 after 1, so we will try to get as many in before we end as possible, but we'll follow up with those if we're not able to answer all questions while we're on the line today. But Jennifer Holmes asks, do students keep up with the workload?
Well, you know, the students' lives vary, but we've been very pleased that many of the students are able to keep up the homework and achieve, in some cases, perfect attendance over the period of 8 weeks. So this shows that they really are remarkably motivated by having the structure of these programs, but also the goals that they aspire to, and instruction that really is meaningful in their lives.
Well, I'm actually going to combine a couple of questions from Betsy Rubin. She's curious if City Colleges is observing teachers using the lesson plans to see if they're implementing them effectively, and are the lesson plans being revised based on feedback from the teachers?
We do go into classrooms to observe and look at the quality of teaching overall, also learn more about our Bridge students. We want to know how they're doing and how they respond to the Bridge program in general. And as far as revising the lesson plans, we're keeping Stephanie pretty busy, but I think ideally we would want to respond to any teacher suggestions, because after all, that's the real world, right? Stephanie, do you want to add anything?
They've not been revised to date. I would think that good professional development would help in how to customize lesson plans to the students that they're actually in front of, and what would be the processes for that.
Yeah, so just to add a little bit to what Stephanie and Ann were saying, we absolutely want this to be an evolving piece of curriculum. It's just, right now we're trying to get more and more of it written, and so we prioritize that over making some of the revisions that we've heard from our teachers. We do have the intention, though, of going back and making some revisions over time.
Well, I would like to chime in here. This is Chris again at Women Employed. That because I have seen, I just want to share with those on the phone, Stephanie, we actually will soon have her working on the 6th Bridge curriculum. So in addition to the one that you'll have access to later today, there are 2 more levels of healthcare curricula, and there are currently 2 levels of curricula for the TDL, Transportation, Distribution, and Logistics area, that have been written and are being tested in classrooms right now. So just from seeing those curricula, I can tell you that while the individual curricula have not been revised, the feedback from the teachers has impacted the writing of future curricula. The other thing, just in conversations from teachers that I've seen, is that, as Samir said, sometimes it's just tailoring the curricula to a particular context or classroom. And in that case, those changes, we wouldn't necessarily want to change the structure of the main curricula. We realize that it won't work for every situation, which is why the Pathways to Careers Network is interested in doing follow-up with those who would like to adapt it. But so the revisions have to be chosen wisely, because not everything will work in every classroom, and it's much more the adaptation, I believe, that's important, almost more than the revisions. So we are going to take, we're at 12 minutes after 1. We're going to take one more question, and then I'm going to hand it back to Carrie. The question is from Carol Larson, and she's wondering what Common Core correlated materials like the Endeavor, Challenger, or Voyager reading series would be helpful to these programs?
The materials really are developed through the use of the curriculum. They don't rely on outside reading materials because the materials are developed partially by the students themselves. And so those are the materials that they have to analyze and apply to their lives and to synthesize career plans, to synthesize reports and essays. So it's not relevant to use another outside reading text.
I wanted to say that one of the agreed upon requirements for these these curricula for these lesson plans is that that they're portable, and that's portable meaning that that's not reliant on somebody's budget or particular books that they happen to have. That you can use what's there, and there's certainly opportunities for supplementation on what people have, but that what has been produced can stand on its own, and that all of the materials are come with the lesson plan.
Thank you. Well, we have a number of other questions, quite a few questions actually we were not able to get to, but we will follow up with those who posed the questions. And at this point, I will hand it back to Carrie.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you so much, Samir and Anne and Stephanie and Marcia. Your presentations were very thorough. Thank you to everybody on the call with your questions. As Chris said, we'll follow up and make sure people get answers to the questions. And I just want to remind everybody, there's the link to the Pathways to Careers Network page on this slide. You'll find there today's webinar, a link to today's webinar, the audio recording, as well as the slides. You will also be able to download the lesson plans that were talked about today. You'll also find archives to previous webinars. So we have 3 previous webinars that are archived there. So please take a look at the network webpage. So finally, I just want to, again, thank everybody, again, very much, and thank my co-hosts, Chris Warden and Mary Kay Devine, who's been answering the chats and giving directions, and the entire team here at Women Employed. Your input from today's polls and surveys, and actually all of your questions, will be used to plan future webinars, so be on the lookout for that. And before you sign off, please complete a short survey to give us feedback. So thank you again, and everyone have a great afternoon.